The escape pod's warning systems blared as Evan struggled with the malfunctioning controls through the cracked viewport. The alien world of Neax loomed, a vibrant mix of purples and greens that would have been stunning if he wasn't hurtling toward it at breakneck speed. "Come on," he muttered, fingers racing across the emergency protocols panel. The pod jolted violently as it entered the upper atmosphere, heat shields already failing. Warning lights flooded the cramped cockpit in red. Main thrusters offline. Backup power 12%. Hull integrity critical. The dense canopy of the alien forest rushed up to meet him. Massive trees with trunks wider than buildings glowing with bioluminescent patterns, their branches intertwining to form a natural mesh that might cushion his fall or tear the pod apart. Evan yanked the emergency brake. The pod's remaining thrusters fired in desperate bursts, slowing his descent just enough that when he hit the canopy, the impact merely knocked him unconscious instead of ending his life. He awoke to the hiss of escaping oxygen and the sweet, thick scent of alien vegetation. The pod had come to rest in a bed of enormous flowers, each petal larger than his entire vessel. Purplish light filtered through the translucent petals above, casting everything in an ethereal glow. "Status report," he croaked, touching the neural interface at his temple. The device flickered weakly. Location unknown. Communications offline. Life support failing. Evan grabbed his emergency pack and popped the pod's hatch. Hot, humid air rushed in, heavy with unfamiliar scents. He tested the atmosphere with his wrist analyzer. Breathable, if barely. The gravity was slightly lower than Earth standard, which might help given the circumstances. He dropped to the forest floor, boots squelching in the thick moss. Everything was impossibly massive. Leaves the size of transport ships, flowers as tall as skyscrapers. Even the insects buzzing past were as large as his fist. "Command, this is Scout Evan Matthews. My pod has crashed on Neax following equipment failure. Coordinates unknown. Requesting immediate extraction." Static answered his call. "Right. Alone." He began cataloging his supplies. Emergency rations for 3 days, basic medical kit, multi-tool, and his partially functioning neural interface. Not much to work with on an alien world. The sound of something large moving through the undergrowth sent him scrambling for cover behind a massive root. A creature resembling an earth deer but the size of a small house wandered past, browsing on the glowing vegetation. "At least I won't starve," Evan muttered, "if I don't get eaten first." He spent the next hour searching for higher ground, hoping to get a better view of his surroundings. The local plant life seemed to react to his presence, leaves curling away as he passed. He was so focused on watching for predators that he didn't notice the subtle shimmer of engineered vines until they snapped tight around his ankles. The trap yanked him skyward with crushing force. Blood rushed to his head as he dangled upside down, spinning slowly. His neural interface sparked uselessly. Well. What have we caught today?" The voice was feminine, amused, and came from somewhere above him. Evan twisted, trying to locate its source. A figure dropped from the canopy, landing with impossible grace. His breath caught. She was enormous. Easily 8 feet tall, with skin that shimmered like polished sapphire in the bioluminescent light. Her eyes glowed amber, pupilless and predatory. She wore armor crafted from what looked like bone and carried a massive bow slung across her back. "I'm Evan Matthews, Earth Explorer," he managed, trying to maintain dignity while hanging upside down. "I crashed and—" "A little one," she cut him off, pressing one long finger against his lips. "You're lucky I found you first. The Sora would have made you a much less entertaining snack." She circled him slowly, examining him like a curious specimen. "I am Amiria, hunter of the Xena, and you," she poked his chest with one finger, sending him spinning again, "are very far from home. Look, I appreciate the warm welcome, but could you maybe let me down? The blood rushing to my head is making it hard to think." Amiria laughed, a rich sound that seemed to vibrate through his chest. "Oh, but you're so adorable when you're helpless. Like a trapped Carrick's kit." She drew a bone knife longer than his forearm. "Still, I suppose I should cut you down before you pass out." The vine snapped. Evan managed to twist and land in a crouch, though his head spun from the sudden change in position. Amiria looked even more imposing from this angle. "I need to contact my people," he said, standing slowly. "My communications are down, but if you have any long-range equipment—" The only equipment you need to worry about now is what you'll use to survive the trials, Emiria interrupted. She grabbed his arm, her hand easily encircling his bicep. Come, the council will want to see what I've caught. Trials? What trials? I'm not here to... You're here because you crashed, she said, practically dragging him through the forest. And on Neax, everything happens for a reason. The council will decide if that reason is worth keeping you alive. That's not very hospitable, Evan muttered, struggling to keep pace with her long strides. Emiria glanced down at him, amber eyes gleaming with amusement. Consider yourself lucky, little one. Most outsiders don't even make it this far, though looking at you, she gave him an exaggerated once-over that made him feel suddenly self-conscious. I'm not sure that's much of an achievement. They emerged into a clearing where massive trees had been shaped into living structures, their bioluminescent patterns forming intricate designs. More of the blue-skinned giants moved about, all female, all armed, all at least 8 feet tall. Welcome to the home of the Zana, Emiria announced. Try not to get stepped on. She led him toward a central structure where 3 enormous thrones had been grown from living wood. Upon them sat the most intimidating women Evan had ever seen. Tribal markings swirled across their blue skin, and their amber eyes seemed to pierce straight through him. Honored Council, Emiria announced, shoving Evan forward. I present a visitor from Earth found in our hunting grounds. The central figure leaned forward, her voice resonating like distant thunder. You know our laws, Hunter Emiria. Outsiders must prove their worth or face exile. But I'm not here by choice, Evan protested. I crashed. Silence, the word echoed through the clearing. 3 trials await you, Earthman. Survive them, and you may find a place among us. Fail, and the jungle claims you. She smiled, showing teeth that seemed just slightly too sharp. Choose. Evan looked around the clearing at the towering warriors, then up at Emiria, who watched him with that same amused smirk. He thought of the massive predators he'd glimpsed in the jungle, of the crushing loneliness of exile on an alien world. I'll take the trials. Emiria's laugh rang out again. Oh, little one, this is going to be entertaining. The council assigned Evan quarters in what appeared to be a storage hut, though even this modest dwelling dwarfed any Earth structure he'd seen. Emiria leaned against the doorway, nearly filling it with her towering frame as he examined his new temporary home. Try not to feel too special, she drawled. This is where we usually keep our hunting equipment, though I suppose you're about the same size as most of our spears. Evan turned to face her, refusing to be intimidated. You know where I come from. It's considered rude to constantly comment on someone's size. And where I come from, little one, it's considered rude to crash land in someone's forest without an invitation. Her amber eyes sparkled with mischief. Though I must admit, you're more interesting than our usual hunting gear. Glad I can provide entertainment, he said dryly, testing the strength of what appeared to be a sleeping platform. So when do these trials begin? Emiria pushed off from the doorframe and stalked toward him with predatory grace. Eager to prove yourself, are you? Or just eager to impress me? I'm eager to survive, Evan countered, though he couldn't help noticing how the bioluminescent patterns from outside made her blue skin shimmer. Unless you'd prefer to help me repair my pod and contact my people? She circled him slowly, and he fought the urge to turn with her to keep her in sight. Now, where would the fun be in that? She stopped behind him, close enough that he could feel her warmth. Besides, I've been assigned as your mentor for the trials. We're going to be spending a lot of time together. Lucky me, Evan muttered, then tensed as she placed her hands on his shoulders. Her touch was surprisingly gentle for someone who could probably snap him in half. Your muscles are so tense, she observed, her voice dropping to a purr. Nervous about tomorrow? Muzzes. Just wondering what kind of trials your people consider appropriate for someone my size, he managed, very aware of her proximity. She spun him around to face her, lifting his chin with one finger so he had to meet her gaze. The trials will determine if you're worth keeping around, little one. Her smile showed just a hint of those sharp teeth, though I must admit I'm starting to hope you survive them. Evan raised an eyebrow. Because you enjoy having someone to tease? Because you're the first male of any size who's talked back to me in decades. She released his chin and stepped back. Rest well, Evan of Earth. Tomorrow we begin with the trial of speed. She paused at the doorway, glancing back over her shoulder. Try not to die too quickly. I'd hate to lose such entertaining company. After she left, Evan sat heavily on the sleeping platform, his heart racing from more than just anxiety about the trials. He'd come to NEAX expecting to find alien life, but nothing in his training had prepared him for this. His neural interface flickered weakly. Warning: elevated heart rate detected. Recommend cardiovascular assessment. Oh, shut up, he told it, lying back on the oversized bed. Let's focus on surviving tomorrow before we worry about my heart rate. But as he drifted off to sleep, his dreams were filled with amber eyes and shimmering blue skin and the musical sound of Amiria's laughter. The morning arrived with a thunderous pounding on his door. Evan jerked awake, momentarily disoriented by the purple light filtering through the living walls. Rise and shine, little one. Amiria's voice boomed through the door. Time to see if you can run as well as you talk. Evan quickly checked his gear and straightened his uniform. Come in, he called, then muttered under his breath, assuming I can even reach the door handle. He heard her laugh outside. I can hear you, you know. Our ears are as superior as everything else about us. Modesty clearly isn't one of those superior traits, he shot back, managing to open the oversized door with some effort. Amiria stood there in what appeared to be lightweight hunting gear, her blue skin practically glowing in the morning light. She grinned down at him. Modesty is for those who have something to be modest about. Her eyes traveled over him appreciatively. Speaking of which, that uniform leaves little to the imagination. Evan refused to blush. I wasn't exactly packed for a social visit. Now, about this trial, straight to business, she pouted playfully. And here I was enjoying our morning banter. She gestured for him to follow her through the village. The trial of speed is simple enough, too. You just have to reach the sacred grove before becoming prey. Prey? Evan quickened his pace to keep up with her long strides. Prey to what, exactly? Amiria's grin turned wicked. Oh, you'll find out soon enough, little one, Zkerba lied. The sacred grove turned out to be a clearing several kilometers away, marked by towering crystal formations that caught the purple light. Amiria led Evan to the starting point, where several other Xena warriors had gathered to watch. Quite a crowd, Evan observed, noting their amused expressions. Do you always get this many spectators for your trials? Oh no, Amiria smirked, adjusting one of her armor straps deliberately slowly. You're special. It's not every day we get to watch a tiny earthling try to outrun a Sora. There's that word again. What exactly is a? A bone-shaking roar cut him off. The ground trembled as something massive approached through the forest. That, Amiria purred, would be a Sora. She bent down, bringing her face close to his. Last chance to forfeit, little one. Though I'd be terribly disappointed and miss the chance to surprise you. Evan met her glowing gaze. Not a chance. Her smile widened. Good answer. She straightened up and addressed the crowd. The rules are simple. Reach the sacred grove before the Sora reaches you. Use anything at your disposal except our help. She glanced down at him again, though I doubt you could reach high enough to ask for it anyway. Another roar. Closer now. Evan could see trees swaying as the creature approached. Any advice? He asked, checking his neural interface. Still barely functioning, but maybe enough to help, Amiria pretended to consider. Try not to die. She traced a finger along his jaw. I'm rather looking forward to watching you attempt the next trial. Your concern is touching, he deadpanned, trying to ignore how his skin tingled where she touched him. Oh, I'm very touching, she winked. Then she stepped back and raised her voice. Let the trial of speed begin. The Sora burst through the tree line, and Evan's heart nearly stopped. It was like a Tyrannosaurus crossed with a crocodile, easily the size of a small building, with iridescent scales and far too many teeth. Run, little one, Amiria called out, laughing. Run fast. Evan didn't need to be told twice. He sprinted toward the sacred grove, his mind racing faster than his feet. The Sora's footsteps thundered behind him, each impact sending vibrations through his bones. Your form is lovely, Amiria shouted from somewhere above. The Xena were following through the trees, but I'd move slightly faster if I were you. Thanks for the tip, Evan gasped, ducking under a massive fallen log. The Sora crashed through it like it was made of paper. His neural interface flickered to life. Analysis. Predator hunting patterns similar to Earth theropods suggest limited turning radius at high speeds. Now that's useful. Evan muttered, spotting a dense cluster of those glowing trees ahead. He changed direction sharply, hearing the Sora skid as it tried to follow. "Ooh, clever," Amiria called down, "but can you keep it up?" The sacred grove was visible now, crystal spires gleaming, but the Sora was gaining, its hot breath washing over him. Evan's lungs burned. His legs trembled. Analysis. Local flora exhibits extreme photosensitivity. Evan grabbed his emergency flare and threw it behind him. The bright light sent the bioluminescent plants into a frenzy of activity, their glow intensifying to blinding levels. The Sora roared in confusion, stumbling. With one final burst of speed, Evan crossed into the sacred grove. The crystal formations hummed, creating some kind of barrier that the Sora pulled back from, snarling in frustration. Evan collapsed, gasping for air. Moments later, Amiria landed gracefully beside him. Well, she said, crouching next to him. "It seems our little earthling has some tricks after all." "Disappointed I survived?" he managed between breaths. She reached out and brushed a leaf from his hair, letting her fingers linger. "Quite the opposite. Now I get to watch you face the trial of craft tomorrow." Her eyes sparkled. "Though you might want to work on your endurance, you seem rather breathless." "I just outran a dinosaur," he pointed out, and very creatively too she helped him to his feet, keeping hold of his hand slightly longer than necessary. "Come. The village will want to celebrate your survival. Unless you're too tired?" Evan straightened up, meeting her challenging gaze. "I think I can manage to keep up with you a bit longer." Amiria's laugh echoed through the sacred grove. "Oh, little one, you really are full of surprises." She started back toward the village, then called over her shoulder. "Try to keep that up. Tomorrow's trial will require skilled hands." Evan watched her go, aware that despite surviving the first trial, he might be in danger of something else entirely where this towering blue huntress was concerned. His neural interface blinked one last time. Warning. Elevated heart rate persists. Cause unclear. Additional data required. "Yeah," Evan muttered, following Amiria's retreating form. "Tell me about it." The celebration of Evan's survival lasted well into the night, though he noticed the Xana's drinks made his head spin after just a few sips. Amiria had watched him with increasing amusement as he tried to handle their oversized cups. Morning came too soon, bringing with it the pounding headache he'd earned. He found Amiria waiting outside his hut, twirling what appeared to be a massive spear made of bone and crystalline materials. "Rough night, little one?" She grinned down at him. "I warned you. Our ale was potent." "Actually, you didn't." Evan squinted up at her. "You just kept refilling my cup." "Did I?" She feigned innocence. "How careless of me, especially considering today's trial requires—" She spun the spear with expert precision, stopping it inches from his face. "Steady hands." Evan didn't flinch. "I assume that's my challenge. Crafting weapons?" Smart and observant, Amiria lowered the spear. "The trial of craft requires you to create 3 weapons using only materials from our forest. You have until sunset." She leaned down, her amber eyes glinting. "Think you can handle something so sizable?" "I suppose that depends on what you consider a weapon," Evan replied, already scanning the surrounding vegetation with his neural interface. "Clever answer." She straightened up. "But remember, they must be able to take down prey, real prey, not just those tiny creatures you're used to hunting." Evan started gathering materials. Crystalline fragments similar to those in the sacred grove, fibrous plants that seemed to conduct energy, and what appeared to be naturally occurring metallic ore in some of the larger trees. He called over to where Amiria lounged against a tree watching him work. Most mentors actually mentor. "Oh, but you're doing so well on your own," she purred. "Besides, I'm enjoying the view. You're quite flexible for such a small thing." Evan felt his ears warm but kept focused on his work. His neural interface was analyzing the properties of each material he gathered. Analysis. Crystal fragments exhibit piezoelectric properties. Organic fibers show high conductivity. Metallic compounds similar to copper alloys. Hours passed as he worked, combining Earth technology principles with local materials. Amiria's mocking commentary gradually shifted to genuine curiosity as she watched him create his first weapon, a staff that channeled the natural energy from the crystal fragments through the conductive fibers. "Interesting design," she admitted, moving closer to examine it. "But can it actually?" Evan touched the staff to a nearby root. Energy coursed through it, causing all the bioluminescent patterns within a meter to flash brilliantly. Impressive. Amiria breathed, then caught herself. For a tiny craftsman, his second creation was a launcher that used the natural tension of certain vines to propel small crystal shards with surprising force. The third combined all three materials into what essentially amounted to a primitive but effective stun weapon. As sunset approached, Amiria helped him carry his creations to the council. "You know," she said casually, "I might have been slightly wrong about your capabilities." "Slightly?" Evan raised an eyebrow. "Don't push it, little one." But her smile had lost its mocking edge. "Though I am curious, how did you know the crystals would work that way?" "Scientific observation. Everything on Neelanak seems to be connected through some kind of natural energy network. I just tapped into it." "Scientific observation?" she repeated thoughtfully. "Yes." "Is that what you were doing when you were watching me earlier?" Evan nearly dropped his weapons. "I was studying the materials." "Of course you were." Her laugh carried that musical quality he was starting to find dangerously appealing. "Come on, tiny one, let's show the council what those clever hands of yours can do." The demonstration went better than expected. Even the council elders seemed impressed, though they tried to hide it. As they left the council chamber, Amiria caught his arm. "Tomorrow's trial will be different," she said, her tone serious for once. "The trial of courage isn't about running or crafting. It's about proving your heart is as strong as any Xena. Is that concern I hear?" Evan met her gaze. "Don't be ridiculous." But she didn't let go of his arm. "I just don't want to have wasted all this time mentoring you, only to watch you fail at the final test. I thought you weren't actually mentoring me. Perhaps I've changed my mind about a few things." She released his arm and stepped back. "Rest well, little one. Tomorrow will test more than your clever tricks." As if to prove her point, a distant roar echoed through the village, different from the Sora but no less threatening. Evan saw several Xana warriors tense. "What was that?" he asked. Amiria's expression darkened. "Something that shouldn't be here. Something that's been taking our younglings." She looked down at him, all playfulness gone. "Perhaps your final trial will serve more than one purpose." The next morning, Evan found not just Amiria waiting for him, but a group of Xana warriors, including a young huntress named Kira, who seemed barely taller than 7 feet, practically diminutive by their standards. "Our scout," Amiria introduced her. "She's been tracking the beast that's been threatening our village." Kira nodded respectfully. "The little Earthman's weapons might prove useful if he survives long enough to use them." "Such confidence in our guest." Another warrior, Sarah, rolled her eyes. She was even taller than Amiria, with elaborate battle scars decorating her blue skin. "Though I must admit, those energy staffs were adequate." "High praise from our weapons master," Amiria smirked. "She usually just grunts at new designs." "I do not grunt," Sarah protested, then proved Amiria's point by grunting in frustration. Their banter was interrupted by the sound of running feet. A young Xana child burst into the clearing, panic clear on her face. "Lyra!" Kira moved to intercept the girl. "Wednesday." "What's wrong?" "Mira and Tanana," the child gasped. "We were gathering crystal shards near the eastern boundary." "The beast! It came out of nowhere." Evan was already checking his weapons. "Where exactly? You can't be serious." Sarah scoffed. "This is a warrior's task, not—" "He's right," Amiria cut her off, surprising everyone. "His weapons might be our best chance." She looked down at Evan, her amber eyes intense. "Though if you get yourself killed, I'll be very annoyed." "I'll try to keep that in mind," Evan replied, then turned to Lyra. "Show us!" They moved through the forest at a pace, the Xana easily keeping up with their long strides while Evan had to practically jog. Amiria kept close to him, occasionally helping him over larger obstacles, with a hand that lingered perhaps longer than necessary. "Your concern is showing," he teased after one such assist. "I simply don't want to explain to the council how I lost their test subject," she retorted. But her grip on his shoulder tightened briefly. Kira held up a hand, stopping them ahead. They could hear something large moving through the vegetation. Then came a sound that chilled Evan's blood, a child's scream. Without thinking, he burst forward, ignoring Amiria's warning. His neural interface sparked to life. Analysis. Predator movement patterns indicate cybernetic enhancement. Caution. Artificial components detected. He skidded to a halt in a small clearing. Two young Xana girls were backed against a crystal formation, and facing them was an impossible creature. It was like nothing native to Neelax. Part organic predator, part machine. Its eyes glowed with artificial red light. Cybernetic implants protruded from its scaled hide. "It's been modified," Evan called back to the others. "Someone's been experimenting on your wildlife." "Explain later," Amiria shouted, notching an arrow. "Save them now." Evan activated his energy staff, sending a pulse of power through the ground. The bioluminescent plants responded, creating a strobing effect that confused the creature's optical sensors. It roared, stumbling back. "Mira! Tana! Run!" Kira called to the children. They bolted, Sarah and another warrior moving to protect their retreat. The beast recovered quickly, its cybernetic systems adapting. It lunged at Evan, who barely rolled aside in time. "Any other clever tricks, little one?" Amiria called, her arrows bouncing harmlessly off the creature's enhanced hide. "Working on it!" Evan's mind raced. The creature's movements were jerky, unnatural. Its implants weren't fully integrated with its organic systems. Analysis. Cybernetic components vulnerable to electromagnetic disruption. "Amiria," he shouted, "I need you to draw its attention. Kira, gather as many crystal shards as you can." "Giving orders now," Amiria teased, but she was already moving, drawing the creature's focus. "How assertive of you!" Evan quickly modified his launcher, using Kira's crystal shards to create what he hoped would work as an electromagnetic pulse weapon. The beast charged at Amiria, who gracefully leapt aside. "Not that I'm rushing you," she called, "but if you have a plan." "Almost there." The weapon hummed to life in his hands. "Everyone clear!" The pulse hit the creature dead on. Its cybernetic components sparked and failed, leaving it confused and vulnerable. Sarah's spear found its mark moments later as the beast fell. Evan's legs gave out. Amiria caught him before he hit the ground. "Careful, little one," she murmured, holding him perhaps closer than necessary. "I'm starting to think you enjoy having me rescue you." "There. Maybe I just enjoy having your arms around me," he replied without thinking, then felt his face heat up. Amiria's eyes widened in surprise, then sparkled with delight. My, the scientist does have a bold streak." "If you two are quite finished," Sarah interrupted, examining the fallen creature, "we have a bigger problem. These modifications, they're advanced. Someone's been hunting on our world, experimenting on our prey." "Poachers," Kira spat. "But why? Isn't it obvious?" Evan struggled to stand, though Amiria kept a steadying hand on his shoulder. "Everything on Nemax is unique. Your biology, your ecosystem. It's a goldmine for anyone willing to exploit it. Then they'll learn why that's a fatal mistake." Amiria's voice was hard, but her touch remained gentle. "So I suppose this means you've passed your trial of courage. Does this mean you'll stop calling me little one?" Her laugh returned, warming something in his chest. "Never, though I might admit you're not quite as helpless as I first thought." "I praise indeed," Sarah muttered, but she was smiling as they made their way back to the village. Evan noticed Amiria stayed close, her hand occasionally brushing his shoulder or back. When he caught her eye, she didn't look away. "You know," she said softly, "I'm starting to think your crash landing might not have been an accident after all." "Oh, maybe," she helped him over a large root, pulling him perhaps unnecessarily close. "The forest has a way of bringing us what we need, when we need it." Before Evan could respond, alarms echoed through the canopy. The village's warning system. "More poachers?" he asked. Amiria's expression hardened. "Let's hope not. I'm not done flirting with my new favorite scientist yet." Despite the danger ahead, Evan couldn't help smiling. Whatever came next, at least he wasn't facing it alone anymore. The village was in chaos when they returned. Sarah ran ahead to join the defense while Kira gathered the children to safety. Massive ships hovered above the canopy, their industrial designs a stark contrast to the organic beauty of Neax. "Poacher vessels," Evan's neural interface analyzed. Heavy armor but primitive shielding. Amiria notched an arrow, her expression fierce. "They dare attack us directly." "They're desperate," Evan realized, watching the ship's movement patterns. "We destroyed their enhanced predator. They're probably losing money and patience." The council had assembled in the central clearing. The head elder's voice boomed across the village. "Warriors of Zana, defend your home!" "I need to get to my crash site," Evan told Emiria. "My pod's communication array. If I can modify it with your crystals, we might be able to disrupt their ship's systems." "You're not going alone." She grabbed his arm. "I've invested too much time in training you to let you get killed. Now just admit you'd miss me," he teased, even as explosions lit up the canopy. Her amber eyes softened for a moment. "Don't push your luck, little scientist." But she pulled him closer, shielding him as debris rained down. "What's your plan?" Working quickly, they gathered a team. Sarah would lead the direct defense, while Kira's scouts would help Emiria reach the crash site. As they moved through the forest, Evan outlined his strategy. "The poachers rely on their technology," he explained. "But NEAC's natural energy field, the one powering your crystals, it's more sophisticated than anything they have. If we can amplify it, we can turn the forest itself against them," Emiria finished, helping him over a fallen trunk. Her hand lingered on his waist. "Clever as always." They reached the crash site just as the first poacher ground teams began landing. On that, Evan worked frantically on the pod systems, while Emiria and the scouts kept watch. "You know," she said between firing arrows at approaching enemies, "when I first saw you hanging in my trap, I never imagined you'd end up defending our home." "When I first saw you, I never imagined I'd want to," he replied, fingers flying over the circuits. His neural interface sparked as he integrated the crystal technology. A blast hit nearby, sending them both sprawling. Emiria covered him with her body, and for a moment time seemed to stop. She was so close, he could see flecks of gold in her amber eyes. "We should focus on survival first," she murmured, though she didn't move immediately. "Right," he agreed, equally reluctant. "Survival first, flirting later." Her laugh was interrupted by another explosion. They separated, returning to work with renewed urgency. The modified communications array hummed to life just as the main poacher force reached their position. Evan activated it, sending pulses of crystal energy through the forest's natural network. The effect was immediate. Every bioluminescent plant for kilometers began to pulse with power. "Fall back to the village!" Evan shouted. "The feedback loop will—" A poacher's energy weapon fired, heading straight for him. Emiria moved faster than he'd ever seen, snatching him aside as the blast scorched the ground where he stood. "Don't you dare die now," she growled, holding tight. "I'm not finished with you yet." The forest erupted with energy. The poachers' weapons and ships, their systems overwhelmed by the crystal resonance, began to fail. The Zana warriors, led by Sarah, launched their counterattack. In the chaos, a massive poacher captain targeted Evan and Emiria. "That's the one," he shouted. "The Earth scientist interfering with our operation." "Your operation ends now," Emiria declared, stepping in front of Evan. The captain sneered. "You primitives and your pet human. You have no idea what this planet is worth." "Worth?" Evan stepped up beside Emiria, his modified staff humming with power. "You're so focused on profit, you've missed what makes NEACs truly valuable." Together they moved as one. Emiria's arrows drove the captain back, while Evan's staff disrupted his armor. The forest itself seemed to fight with them, vines entangling their enemies, crystals pulsing with blinding light. The battle ended decisively. The remaining poachers, their technology useless, surrendered to the Zana. As the adrenaline faded, Evan found himself swaying with exhaustion. Emiria caught him as she always did. "The council will want to speak with us," she said softly. "Can it wait until the world stops spinning?" She smiled. "I know somewhere better for recovery." She led him to the highest tree in the village, helping him climb to a massive branch that overlooked the entire forest. The first light of dawn was breaking, painting the sky in purples and golds. "I never thought I'd find this view normal," Evan mused, letting himself lean against her. "I never thought I'd find your size charming," she countered, wrapping an arm around him. "Yet here we are." "Here we are," he agreed. "My rescue beacon's working again. Earth will send a ship soon." Emiria tensed slightly. "And will you go with them?" He turned to face her, though even sitting she towered over him. "That depends on what?" "On whether a certain tall, blue-skinned huntress wants me to stay." Her amber eyes searched his face. "You would consider remaining?" Even among giants who once mocked your size? Size doesn't matter, he smiled. You taught me that eventually. She laughed, the sound mixing with the morning chorus of the forest. Stay, she said softly. Stay and help us protect Neax. Stay, and let me continue discovering all the ways you surprise me. Her hand cupped his cheek. Stay with me. You know, he leaned into her touch. For a warrior who spent days mocking me, you can be remarkably persuasive. Is that a yes, little one? He pulled her down for a kiss, surprising them both with his boldness. When they separated, both slightly breathless, he grinned. What do you think? The sun rose fully over Neax, its light catching the crystal formations and filling the forest with rainbow refractions. Below, the village began to stir, Xena warriors already beginning repairs, but atop their branch, Evan and Emiria remained wrapped in each other's embrace, proof that sometimes the greatest discoveries come in unexpected sizes. You realize, she murmured against his hair, this means you're stuck with my teasing forever? I think I can handle it, he replied, perfectly content in the arms of his giant warrior. Though we might need to work on your pet names. Her laughter echoed through the canopy, joining the natural symphony of their home. And for Evan, that made all the difference in the universe. 3 months after the battle with the poachers, Evan stood in his newly constructed laboratory, a blend of Earth technology and Xena architecture. The living walls pulsed with crystal energy, and workbenches scaled for both his size and his larger companions lined the space. Still tinkering with your toys, little one? Emiria's voice carried from the doorway, where she leaned with characteristic grace. These toys helped save your forest, he reminded her, not looking up from the crystal array he was modifying. And shouldn't you be training the new hunters? Sarah's handling it. She moved behind him, resting her chin on top of his head, something she knew both annoyed and secretly pleased him. Besides, I missed my favorite scientist. Together. We had breakfast together. That was hours ago. Her arms wrapped around him, easily lifting him away from his work. And I've discovered I'm rather possessive of my tiny mate. I'm average height on Earth, he protested, though he didn't struggle against her hold. But you're not on Earth anymore. She turned him to face her, amber eyes sparkling with mischief. Having second thoughts? Before he could answer, Kira burst into the lab, slightly out of breath. Evan! The communication array! It's picking up something! They rushed to the village center, where the modified array Evan had built was humming with activity. A familiar signal pattern flashed across the interface. It's an Earth ship, he confirmed, reading the data. Probably responding to my original distress beacon. Emiria's grip on his shoulder tightened slightly. Have you decided what to tell them? The village gathered as Evan established communication. The Earth captain's voice crackled through the speaker. Matthews, this is Rescue Vessel Horizon. Interaction. We've traced your beacon, preparing for extraction. Evan glanced at Emiria, then at the village that had become his home, at Sarah teaching young warriors to use his hybrid weapons, at Kira mapping the forest energy patterns with his sensors, at the council members who now sought his advice on protecting their world. He activated the transmitter. Horizon, this is Matthews. Thank you for responding. However, I need to inform Earth Command that I've accepted a permanent diplomatic and scientific posting on Neax. I'm sending coordinates for a landing zone. There's quite a bit we need to discuss about establishing formal relations with the Xena. Emiria's brilliant smile was worth any career complications this might cause. Are you sure? She asked softly. Your people might not understand. My people need to learn what I have. He turned to face her. That strength comes in many forms and sizes. He pulled her down for a kiss. Is highly overrated. Later, watching the Earth ship descend through Neax's purple sky, Emiria and Evan stood on their favorite branch. You know, she mused, this means I'll have to share you with diplomatic duties now. Jealous? Please. She lifted him easily, setting him on her lap as if any Earth diplomat could compete with a Xana warrior. I don't know, he teased. Some of them are quite tall. Her growl of mock outrage turned into laughter as he kissed her. Below them, the village prepared to meet their first official Earth visitors. But up here, in their private sanctuary, none of that mattered. My little scientist, Emiria murmured against his lips. My giant warrior, he replied softly, and as Neax's crystals pulsed around them. Both knew that some discoveries transcend all physical dimensions, and some connections defy all conventional measures. Just promise me one thing, Evan said suddenly. Anything? When the diplomats arrive, try not to call them tiny ones too obviously. Their laughter rang through the forest, a sound that had become his favorite melody in all the universe. The future might hold challenges, but together they'd face them all one giant step at a time.